Hey guys!
Hello!
So we're back. We've polished up the case, refinished it, turned out beautiful. So now the scary part. Not that that wasn't scary.
Well, that wasn't that bad.
So the radio is, the case is 1936 Philco case.
Okay.
And we didn't want to mess that up, so that's scary. This is also from the 1930s, maybe early 40s. Field coil speaker.
Yep.
They haven't made these since World War II or so. They're very rare, especially in perfect condition like this. So this is even scarier because we have to hook it up to high voltage.
Sure.
And if we do anything wrong, it's ruined forever.
How high a voltage are we talking?
Well, at the end of the day, higher than today. But we'll get into that later.
Okay.
We still have a lot of experimentation and testing to do before we get to that point.
Okay.
So let me walk everyone through what this guy is first.
Okay.
Modern speakers have a big magnet on the back. The material that they use for those permanent magnets were basically the mass production of that stuff was perfected World War II era. So because this is pre-World War II, it's pre-easy access to that material. So instead of using a permanent magnet, they're using an electromagnet on the back of the speaker.
Okay.
So the speaker works by having a magnetic field here and an electromagnet on the voice coil. So as you energize the polarity back and forth on the voice coil, it pushes against the existing magnetic field of the permanent magnet in modern speakers, and that voice coil is hooked to the paper cone. So it can actually move that paper cone in and out and cause vibrations to go out into the air. Now, this has an electromagnetic field back here. So you need to energize this big coil with high voltage in order to create the magnetic field so that that voice coil has something to push against. And we've done a little extra research into this. So the voice coil is actually in series with part of a coil in here. So we've got the audio signal coming in from this here, which we will talk about a little bit further later on. And the green and black wires, as you can see, come in here and here. So this is basically, think of this as the ground side or the negative side. Okay? And that's going directly to one side of the voice coil. The other side of the voice coil is coming up here, where this black line is coming out. And that's going up here into a coil back here with the field coil, and then back out along this yellow wire to here, and then out to the amplifier with green. So what we've got there is there's a voice coil attached to the paper cone, and there's another coil back here that's inverted, and they're in series with one another. So when you send a sine wave through it, that peak is polarity going in one direction on this half of the coil and the inverted polarity on the other half of the coil. So they create opposing magnetic fields, and they either push each other apart, they pull each other together. So as you send your audio signal through that with no energy at all being sent in the primary coil here, the field coil, it'll still push against itself just from the signal from the amplifier. Now, to make that a lot stronger, we want a really big magnetic field back here. So these two are the primary, I shouldn't use primary because this is not a transformer, I don't want to confuse people, but the big coil, the majority of this is these two wires. And that's designed for a much higher voltage. And what we're doing here is giving it 26.6 volts. Off of Addie's beautiful Churchill, we call him Winston, homemade variable DC power supply.
Yep.
So this has got a little knob here. You can adjust how much voltage you're sending out, and we are able to ramp that up to 26.6 with no problems whatsoever.
Cool.
We also have a current meter in series with that coil, so we can make sure we're not sending it too much. So right now it's got 40 milliamps
That's not too bad.
of current draw for this. So we're being very careful and safe not to hurt this coil, the main coil, at all. And the amplifier side of things, this is also one of Addie's. This is her LM386 kit.
Yep.
Which is just silly that we're using it for this, but also awesome.
Yep.
So what is this, a 5 watt?
I don't know.
Maybe not even 5 watts.
I don't know.
But this little IC Type D class, if you know what that is, op amp amplifier. So we've got a little piano, electric piano, going into that, and the speaker outputs of it are hooked up to the big, 12-inch speaker voice coil there, and the amplifier is being powered by a 9-volt battery. So we're doing some experiments here, and I'm going to turn the power supply off for the field coil.
So you're only using
we're only using the voice coil and the inverted side of it right now.
Okay.
And only powered by this little tiny, LM386 board.
Okay.
So you can hear it is making noise.
Yep. I may have turned down the piano at some point.
Yeah, I turned it back up. It's good.
Okay.
And that's line level coming out of the piano, and then speaker level coming out of this, but not super powerful. It's a nice clean tone, whatever. So now let's energize the field coil. Because it's got a stronger magnetic field there to work off of. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's with the LM386 turned way down. Now, Eddie's got the big capacitor installed on this, so that's 200 gain, right? 200 decibels
Something like that.
of gain, because she's got the big capacitor on there, so it gets crunchy and distorted because we're overdriving. But, you get the idea. Even with 25 volts on the coil, it's plenty loud enough to make the camera angry at it being too loud. So, yeah, so that's where we're at right now. We're going to do some more experimentation and see if we can figure out how much better it gets when we use more voltage, while being very careful not to overwhelm the coil with too much current. Once we get up to like the higher voltage stuff, like the 90 volt stuff, we're going to need like an in-series power resistor that helps limit the current.
Okay.
Because the idea is that we're going to be able to plug this into the wall.
Yep.
So we've got some options, we've got some research to do, we've got some trial and error, some science.
So let me just double check here. You have the sound obviously from your piano coming into the LM386
at line level.
At line level. That's connecting to those two wires, which are connected.
These two.
Yeah. Which, if you look beyond them, are connected to.
This one is going to one side of the voice coil.
Yeah.
This is going to one side of the inversion of the voice coil. This is coming from the other side of the inversion of the voice coil, and it's going to the other side of the voice coil. It's kind of weird, kind of complicated. This is old school stuff.
Okay. And then by energizing the field coil, or the
creating a permanent magnetic field that does not change its polarity. It's static.
And that just like amplifies.
It's like having a big magnet sitting here.
And then just amplifies.
It creates a strong magnetic field for the voice coil to press against.
Okay.
Or to pull towards.
Oh, I see. So just, yeah, it just amplifies it.
It doesn't amplify it, it gives it something to push against. If you were swimming.
Yeah.
And the water was like super thin.
Yeah.
It would run around your fingers easier.
Yeah.
And you'd have a harder time getting forward.
Oh, I see.
Whereas if it was thicker,
yep,
you'd be able to push against it easy. And if it got thick enough, we wouldn't call it water, we would call it the ground. And we would just run instead of swim.
Right.
Right on the surface, right?
Yep.
So this is giving us our solid surface that the voice coil can push against.
Okay. Cool. Well, so what's the next step after this?
I'm working with a bunch of people, a bunch of smart people, to figure out what happens if you put a lot of current, or a lot of power, I should say, in the speaker inputs here, in that voice coil and its inversion. If you put a lot of power on those, if it's going to get warm and potentially damage it, if this isn't strong enough, right? If it's using those two inversions to work against each other for the majority of its loudness out here, I'm thinking that that would be too inefficient, so it would be turning a lot of the power into heat. Whereas if you've got the big magnetic field sitting back here, that's going to suck the energy right out of it and make it so that it's not working against itself to move the cone, it's working against this to work the cone.
Okay.
And that would make it so that the energy is being more efficiently transferred into kinetic energy here rather than heat energy from the coils. So we're thinking that more voltage here means stronger magnetic field, means that the voice coil doesn't have to work as hard. Therefore, it doesn't make as much heat, and that's safer. So it may actually be safer for the speaker if that field coil voltage is higher. But I'm talking to a bunch of people, and we're trying to figure out exactly what's going to be best for this before we, do anything stupid.
So 26 volts is still potentially too low.
26 volts, we're getting 40 amps across the coil, and it's probably way too little voltage for what this is designed for.
40 milliamps.
It was probably running at like 90 or 100 volts.
Oh, okay. So we may need to make another power supply.
Yep.
Okay. All right. We'll see how it goes.
Yep.